So here we are again in Tonopah. Tax season's over, and I hadn't planned on doing a video now, but I just got done watching a rather long video by my man Cobb, Michael Bowen, and that was inspired by a problem a friend of his is having with their mom, who is not dying of cancers as was expected, but apparently it's changed a lot of things in the relationship. And I'm going to come right out and say it. I have no idea what that's like. Um, that's something my kids, or my son at any rate, is probably going to have to deal with down the road here, um, because um, unlike the rest of the branches in the Trainer family tree, ours seems to have a predilection for early and at least quick death. My father died about died back in 2000, the same year that my marriage was falling apart and a bunch of other crap had happened. And I kept meaning to write about his death, and I can never quite bring myself to do it. But I'm going to talk about it a little bit now because it seems appropriate. He died hard. His lungs were failing. They hadn't worked all that well for quite a while anyway, and he was on an oxygen bottle at the last, and his heart was starting to go. And the way it went, he went into the hospital on the 6th or 7th of December in 2000. Woke my little brother up because he was living there at the time, and had him take him to the hospital at Andrews Air Force Base. And he never did say what the doctors told him, but Carlos and I figured it out later that they must have given him the word. They must have told him that, you know, his clock was pretty much done. And so he came home, and as we figured out later, he got everything ready. He paid all the December bills, got everything up to date, and then went back to Malcolm Grow to die, which was extremely painful. Couldn't give him morphine because that would stop his heart. So I got there about 6 hours before he passed on. Um, Flew down from Minnesota after sending the kids off to school. Literally, not even 15 minutes after I'd put them on the bus, um, Carlos called and let me know that if I wanted to see and talk to Dad, I'd better get my ass down to D.C., which I did. And as I say, I got there about 6 hours before he died, and it was a hard death. Um, the lungs weren't getting enough air to the bloodstream. The heart was hammering away trying to keep up, and yeah, and he'd been like that for a while. And there was nothing the docs could do. Like I said, they couldn't give him morphine to ease the pain because that would stop his heart, and nothing else was going to work at that point. And as I say, he died hard. And knowing my dad, I suspect that was the way he wanted to go because he was pretty hardcore traditional Catholic, and I would be willing to bet that on some level he felt honored to go out that way, you know. So And about 8 years after that, about a year after I had moved back to the DC area, after getting my kids through high school in one fashion or another, and sticking around to run an anime convention instead of finishing my master's degree in education, partially because I I no longer wanted to be a teacher in the public schools, and at least not in Minnesota. And I felt at the time that doing stuff for Anime Detour to assure its continued success um, was more important than finishing that MA, which I didn't, which at that point I didn't want anyway. And and so I went back to the DC area and lived with my mom and my nieces and my brother for a little while before I moved into my own place in Alexandria. And in 2008, mom had some kind of trouble, pneumonia, I think it was, and she was in the hospital at Fort Washington. And a major thunderstorm moved through the area, and the power went out, and she died of a heart attack. So that was over quickly. I did not have to go through what my O'Malley cousins did, which was having to endure watching my grandmother die slowly over a number of years after her mind had gone. I don't know what that's like. Um, kind of hoping to spare my kids that, although, no, I'm not going to say it. I'm not going to make assumptions about people who have decided that I'm no longer their father. So, you know, so I won't make any assumptions about her opinions on such matters. Um, anyhow, the the thing about death is it's always been on my mind. If you've read my memoirs, such as they are, what did you do in the Cold War, Dad? Um, you know that I joined the army at the age of 19 because I was looking for a way to die without actually making the effort to kill myself. Because after all, suicide is one of the mortal sins, and there was something in me that said, no, I'm not going to rope myself. I'm not going to shoot myself in the head, and none of that crap. Um, I may put myself in a position where I am more likely to die, but I'm not just going to you know, go take the easy way out. And I didn't, as it happened. I did manage to wangle an assignment to the Fulda Gap, where I figured if something went down, that would be the place to be to get it over with quickly. But the Russians had other ideas. The army had other plans, and I wound up doing my 2.5 years overseas in Karlsruhe with a court support ASA company and not dying. Um, I had expected to finish my enlistment, re-enlist for another 6 years, um, stay tactical, far away from the field stations, and that didn't happen because I was a screw up and drank too much, ate too much, and as I said in the book, the army would have been willing to forgive me, you know, being being either disobedient or being a fat ass, but not both. So I went home and I drifted. I had no idea what I wanted to do with myself, and had a certain young woman from Minnesota not come upon me after I had said something phenomenally stupid to one of my oldest friends. Um, I probably would have drunk myself to death, or found some other way to remove myself. Um, but she found me, and we got married, and we had the kids. And so for the next 16 years, I was too busy um, doing stuff, trying to find a job, trying to find better jobs, getting an education that I thought might help me get an even better job, and eventually winding up working for Wells Fargo, doing a strange sort of internal accounting position, despite not being a real accountant. And and that was where life went off the rails for the second time. Because in 2000, after coming back from a stint working for an old friend of mine, and having that job go off the cliff in flames, um, came home, and I was broken. I was very badly broken. I had, from my perspective, two of my oldest friends had turned on me for no good reason that I could see, and the worst part of it was they were rather obviously lying to me about why they were firing me, and I couldn't make any sense out of it. I hung around for 6 months doing temp jobs in the Alexandria City public school system and a couple of other places before finally giving up and coming home to Minnesota. And my wife didn't understand. She was glad to have me back, but I don't I don't think it sunk into her just how badly damaged I was. I didn't want to go to counseling. I didn't want to talk to her about it. I didn't want to talk to anybody about it. I didn't want to talk to anybody about anything unless it was absolutely necessary and job related. That was it. And I thought about going back to school for a master's degree, and I gave that up. I was in no fit mental shape to do anything like that. And and a year later, it all came apart. I'm not gonna go into the reasons for that, but because I've written about it before, and anybody who knows me knows what happened anyway. So there I was, with the house, with the dog, with the kids, and just putting one foot in front of the other, going to my father's death, coming back to get the kids and the dog, and going back to DC to bury my father, and then coming home um, over the course of the worst Christmas holidays I've ever had in my life. And I hope the same is true for my kids. I hope they never have a holiday season that miserable again. Um, but we got home, and I just kept going because I didn't know what else to do. I could have, I suppose, allowed myself to break, but that that would have been failing on two fronts. It would have been failing my kids who needed me to keep my shit together and keep going to work and you know doing the things that needed to be done to hold the remaining parts of the family together. Um, and I did those things, and eventually I got off the antidepressants, and I got out of the pit that I had allowed the situation to put me in, and I got better. Um, I I started going to science fiction conventions again. I got involved in a fan club for a short-lived TV series that struck my fancy. I got eventually I wound up being involved in starting an anime convention, and all of this is kind of wrapped up in the notion that I expected to die before I was 21, and when I didn't really know what to do with myself. And I was perfectly happy to let someone else look at me and say, "Well, he's got a pretty solid work ethic. He seems like a fairly decent person. Maybe he looks like a likely prospect to sire my children." And that's basically how the marriage started. And since then, I've had I've had several brushes with death. Um, I have been lucky enough that on the occasions when I've wound up in the hospital with cellulitis or sepsis, that the antibiotics have worked and they didn't have to haul me out and cremate the body. But it's still a very real possibility. If I screw up my diet, if I'm not careful with my personal hygiene, you know, I'll be packing my nose hose and a few changes of clothes and calling the ambulance to take me up the road to Hawthorne again, and hoping that you know this time around the antibiotics will be able to do the job without killing me in the process because um, I'm at the stage in dealing with these things that the antibiotics they have to use are sufficiently toxic that they do their own damage while they're destroying the hostile bacteria that are trying to kill me. So they have to be very careful with them. And I don't have any morbid fear of death at this point. I got over that a long time ago. I figure the guy upstairs knows what he's doing. Um, he's he's put me down here for a reason, and maybe I fulfilled that reason already. Maybe I still have things left that I need to do. Um, I understand that a lot of veterans get asked, especially the ones who are in Vietnam or the sandbox or Afghanistan. You know, did you kill anybody? And some of the answers can be pretty entertaining. if you've got the right sense of humor. Like, like for example, you mean today, or you know. But another another response that makes rocks people like that back on their heels and makes them think a little bit is, well, how come you don't ask me how many lives I saved? In my case, I'm pretty sure it's at least two that I know for sure. Um, there are two people who are still walking around on this earth, and from what I see of them on social media, they seem to be pretty happy, living good lives, you know. But they were both in a pretty bad place for different reasons, and I would like to think, no, I know, I am fairly certain that they are, that they're still alive, and that they're a lot happier than they were, because I talked them out of their depressions. I got them back on the road to being solid, reasonably happy people. And so there's those people. For a long time in Minnesota, I was a blood donor. They used to call me every quarter, sometimes a little more often, because at the time my blood lacked a certain virus that was very common in those days. But I want to say cytomegalovirus, but I'm not sure that was it. Anyway, um, the War Memorial Blood Bank would call me up and say, "Hey, we need your blood for the preemies," and I go down there. They take a pint out, and I'd go on my way. Well, eventually, the Red Cross decided that since I'd been stationed overseas in the '80s, there was a possibility I might have contracted mad cow disease, and they couldn't be sure because there's still no test for it. So they decided they were better off not having my blood, and I was like, well, that sucks. Okay, but so I'm pretty sure that I probably saved at least a couple of kids with my blood. I'd like to think so. And so at this stage of my life, I think that the reason I'm still around is because, maybe he thinks that I'm going to be in a position to do it again, that I'm going to be able to find somebody who's having a lot of problems and not coping with them real well, and maybe I can talk these people around. Maybe I can get them to, you know get hold of their lives and grab themselves by the stacking swivel and get back on the road to happiness, or at least contentment. So, but at the same time, a friend of mine last year sent me a sticker with the caption "Memento mori." There's a skull on it, and for those of you that don't do the Latin, the phrase means "remember you are mortal," and it's a big thing in Catholicism. It doesn't get as much play as some of the other parts of the faith, but the truth of it is that we're expected to keep that in mind, that we are mortal, and we have certain responsibilities as mortals, um, and some of that is remembering that, you know as the Eucharistic prayer says, remember those who have gone before us, marked with the sign of faith. All your ancestors who helped make you what you are, and all the saints and the sinners and all those people. you're expected to remember them, say some prayers for them in case they didn't wind up where we were hoping they'd wind up. Um, and that's part of your job as a Catholic. The other part of it I'm pretty much done with. I raised my kids for better or for worse. Um, I didn't do a very good job of raising them Catholic, although in my defense, I will say that their godparents, who were Catholics, didn't lift a finger to help. Uh, Not even to the extent of coming by on Sundays while I was off at annual training or off on the weekend drills to take the kids to church. So, bitch, bitch, whine, whine, moan, moan, and besides, they're dead anyway. So and this all went down years ago. So there's not a lot of point in me moaning about it at this point, but it still rankles a little bit. Could have used the help. So anyway, I'm not. It's not that I'm feeling particularly sick or mortal. It's just that I've been thinking about these things for a while. Um, some of them for a lot longer than just a while, and I could never get around to putting it down on paper. So I've finally gotten that off my chest. Um, and I think I'm going to let it go at that. I have some other things on my mind, some books I've read lately, and there's the whole excursion to Balticon and points south that's coming up later this month, and I guess I'll talk about that later because this has already gone on for almost half an hour of you know of a walk down the darker parts of memory lane. Anyway, if you're watching this, um, say a prayer for your departed relatives and for the ones that are still walking the earth. And we'll see a lot of you in a couple of weeks. Take care.